Great. If we could get our slides shared, and then we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we will get started in just a moment.
Sorry, my computer's going a little slow.
Okay. Great. So we are here today for the Early Learning Hub Rulemaking Advisory Committee. And Gabby, you can go to the next slide. That's just our header for our first meeting. So our agenda for today, we are going to get started with introductions. And I think we have had most people already rename themselves as participants. And so that's for our attendance purposes. But I will ask my DELC colleagues to come off mute and introduce ourselves so you know who is in the room for DELC staff. I can get us started. My name is Maria Mendoza. I am an Early Learning Hub coordinator, and I use she, her, aya pronouns, and I will pass it to Nancy.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Nancy Hout. I'm also an Early Learning Hub coordinator with DELC, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'll pass it along to Rachel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Elliott. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Head Start Collaboration Specialist at the Department of Early Learning and Care. And I'll pass it to Kate.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Dennison. I am the Government Affairs Manager for DELC, but I am filling in temporarily on rules related issues for Chris O'Grady, who recently left us for greener pastures. So I am the rules coordinator for purposes of this meeting, and I will pass it to Gabby.
Hi, everyone. Gabby Hernandez, she, her pronouns. I'm the Early Learning Council Administrator and also really just here to help support Nancy and Maria with this Rulemaking Advisory Committee. Great to be here.
Thanks, everyone. And so I think that wraps it up for DELC folks. And we are just going to continue through our agenda. We're going to get going with reviewing our group agreements. Then we will go over the RAC meeting process overview. We'll do a brief touch on what is a hub, the review of the RAC purpose, review the draft rules, and then we'll finish out with closing comments and thank yous. So for group agreements, here is where we wanted to get started. We wanted to make sure that we allow for all voices to be heard, encourage and honor individual perspectives and truths. All experiences are valuable and contribute to our shared understanding. Please ask questions if something is not clear. We ask that we remain focused on the topic of the work group. We ask that you use the raise hand function or the chat for comments. And we also ask that you speak slowly to support our interpreter in providing accurate translation. And is there anything else that I think we may have missed or that you would like to add to our group agreements? You can feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll give it another second before we move on. Great. Okay. Next slide, please. So for the actual RAC feedback, we are going to have about 6 minutes of discussion per rule, and we're going to ask that you refer to the current and proposed rules document. And for you to share your feedback, we're going to ask that you raise your hand, and when you're called upon, unmute, and then you can share. We want you to be mindful of time so that we can ensure that others have the opportunity to share as well. And then just keep in mind that you're also able to submit feedback in the chat, and we will be saving the chat for documentation purposes. So if you do not have the opportunity to share your feedback vocally, we will take that commentary in the chat as well. Next slide, please. So we
Okay,
want to
next, I'm going to share some information about hubs and include a little history. In 2013, the Oregon legislature passed a House bill authorizing the Early Learning Council to create regional and community-based early learning hubs. The bill directs hubs to focus on children and families furthest from opportunity, including those that have been historically underserved and underrepresented in our systemic decision making. Next slide, Gabby. So the bill called for 16 early learning hubs, and as you can see on this map, the size of the region and populations vary greatly. Some hubs include one county, while others include 3 or 4. Many hubs have a mix of rural, metro, and suburban populations. Next slide. As you can see from this visual, hub work is all about collaboration among the governance council, backbone entities, hub staff, sector partners, tribal nations, and always including family voice. The rules that we are bringing to you today and tomorrow for feedback involve clarifying some of these roles. Next slide. So how do hubs bring all of these components together, all of the partnerships and sectors and family voice? They do this through 3 different approaches. So I want to say first that while hub initiatives and investments look quite different across Oregon, there are these roles that all hubs share, and that includes convening families, cross-sector partners, connecting, making sure that families and community partners are empowered to fully participate in the design of services and supports for families with young children. And hubs are all capacity builders. They're working to expand the capacity of the early childhood system to be, effective, coordinated, and coherent while focusing on serving children under 6 and their families and focusing on equity, whether it's racial, economic, or geographic. Maria?
next slide, please. So what would be the purpose and the need for the rule change? One, really, the rules have not been reviewed since the hubs were created 10 years ago, and the current rule set is incomplete and does not address roles and responsibilities of all parties. And current rules do not reflect current best practices, legislative mandates, and the operational realities. And so that was really the purpose of us wanting to get these updated. Next slide, please. So here is an overview of all of the proposed rule changes that we're going to be touching on throughout the meetings, these next 3 meetings, and the ones with the check mark are the rules that we're going to be focusing on today. So the current rules that we're going to be looking to update and touching on today are purpose and scope, definitions, early learning hub functions, the administration of early learning kindergarten readiness partnership and innovation program, and then a proposed new rule addressing administration. Next slide, please. And here we're going to be talking about what is really the scope for the Early Learning Hub RAC. We are here because we would love to ask you to help us identify a couple of things. Fiscal impacts, so resources that are needed to implement this change, equity impacts, unintended consequences that may impact specific groups or communities, unclear rule language, any unintended consequences as a result of the rule change, or any additional resources that may be needed to support the implementation of these rules. Next slide, please. So here's where we're going to start to go over each of the rules, and we're going to give you just a quick summary of each of them. And we will start with purpose and scope, which if you have our draft rules up, this gets started on page 1. And so the purpose and background is really the rule clarifies that the Department of Early Learning and Care's authority in administering the Early Learning Hub system under ORS 417.827. What is the reason for the change? DELC needed to establish a hub framework for collaboration across sectors to implement Raise Up Oregon and hub agreement goals and ensure equitable, family-centered early childhood services. Draft rules identified governance, operational, and fiscal roles of hubs and the relationship with backbone agencies. So the impact of the change in summary would be this brings clarity that Raise Up Oregon is the guiding vision for all hubs. These rules define the governance, operational, and fiscal roles of early learning hubs, including their relationship with backbone agencies and the department, ensuring alignment with Raise Up Oregon's integrated and anti-racist and collaborative framework. And so here is where we would welcome you to we welcome any feedback here. Anything that, as you look at the draft rules, we're here to listen and take notes. Any clarifications for purpose and scope? Yes, Annalise?
You need us to bring those rules. You're not going to show those on the screen. We need to bring those rules up from the email.
We can toggle between the two. Gabby, would you take us to purpose and scope for page 1?
Let me toggle through. One sec.
Thank you. And while Gabby's getting that up, we will have Rachel in the chat, keeping us on track with time so that we make sure that we are able to get through all of our rules. And so she'll just be dropping some comments in the chat and just saying a couple minutes left, and just so that we can make sure that we get to all of our rules that we need to touch on today. Diane, did you have something?
I do. I was just curious on the backbone agencies. I know that some hubs are they're ESDs and some are community colleges. Is there a percentage that are all similar backbone agencies, or they just all vary?
We do have a variety. I would say we have probably the largest amount of ESDs who are the backbone agencies, but we also have a community college, nonprofit, a workforce investment board. Nancy, who am I missing as well? A CCO,
Yeah.
coordinated organization, and that might be it.
Annalise?
Yeah. I'm sorry. These don't appear to be in legislative format, so I apologize. I'm a little lost because, and I'm just willing to admit it. I don't know what the changes are. Like, this is not new language, right? This is all the same language that's already there.
This is all new language, right, Maria and Nancy?
It's expanded for sure. I think the current language we did include in our packet, but let's see if we can get that up.
Sorry, bear with me. My internet is going very slow
Sí, sí, la
today.
estoy escuchando perfecto.
I dropped the link where it has our current language. And so for for this one, you would need to scroll down. It was very bare previously. So some of it might look like this is just very bare minimum, but it really was just expanded to include language from Raise Up Oregon. And let me see if I can highlight some of the other things. But yes, it is in our, so it'd be towards the bottom of page 2. And it before it was combined. It goes from the bottom of page 1, 2, bottom of page 2 into 3.
Is this what you're referring to, Maria?
No, that one's our, so if you scroll further down, it'll give us our current rules. Let's see in the rock packet
Yeah,
going.
it's just really difficult to try to go off of two documents at the same time and have a conversation because it's just it's a lot of work and it's a heavy lift to try to do this at 4:30 in the afternoon and try to put these two pieces together to try to figure out what is new. Yeah, that's a good idea, Lisa. If we could look at the one that was filed with the state because that should with Secretary of State's office because that should have the legislative format.
And I just put that in the chat. If you'd like to, you'll see the track changes there.
Annalise, I think to answer your initial question, this section is all new. This wasn't there before. It's my understanding.
Okay, yeah,
That's
the
what
PowerPoint said it was updating, and I'm like, I couldn't even find that language in the materials that we were sent. So yeah, I think it's new.
It was bundled before as one, and so tech it would be just a matter of perception because before it labeled it differently where they were chunked together, and now we have separated them to have one be more so purpose and scope, and then one is early learning hub functions. We can give folks a moment to look at whichever format works best for you and welcome feedback. Yes,
Diane?
Thank you. So I'm looking at the one from the packet, just to be clear, and I'm looking at, now where did it go? I'm so sorry. The Family Advisory Council. And in all of these, I'm curious about the accountability for things like reaching those, geographic areas that might not be close in proximity to where they're located. And if there's school district noted anywhere in this? And then, what is the accountability on whether they have a family advisory council or what's the support behind that? Sorry, that was too many at once.
Great. Thank you. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Diane. That's great feedback.
So can I ask a process question? Are we just focusing in paragraph by paragraph, or are you wanting feedback on all the sections that you said were on the agenda tonight?
We're going to go section by section. Yes,
Okay, so we're still on purpose and scope.
correct.
Thank you.
And Rachel, how much time do we have for this slide?
As I paused a bit for people to get acquainted with the documents, we have about 3 minutes left.
Thank you.
Brett, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. One thing I'm noticing, and I'm reading the one that Nancy posted that has track changes, so that I'm apologies if I missed something. But I notice under scope and purpose, or I guess in this version, it's Early Learning Hub purpose and functions 900-0015. That's the section I'm looking at. It doesn't seem to say anything about the hub's role related to coordinated enrollment, which seems to be an important hub function, and one that, in my perspective as a hub governance member, seems to sit outside the scope of hub governance, quite frankly, and um, it seems that decision making around coordinated enrollment lies solely with hub staff. And given the fact that that is such a prominent function that hubs fulfill in our system, it seems odd to me that it seems to exist outside of the governance structure and process.
Thank you, Brett.
Brett, would you add, I know we're not to that particular provision yet, but if you have suggestions for clarification, please feel free to send those over.
Kate, can you clarify what you mean by send those over? Because I would have some input as well on that. Is it just in the chat?
Yep, we'll go over public comment processes at the end, but I'll put in our rules coordinator email address too in the chat so you can use that as well. There are multiple ways that you can submit.
And Maria and Nancy, we are at time.
So I'm going to ask another process question then. So Kate, does that mean we're not taking verbal input right now?
No,
I'm
we
confused
are.
with
I'm
that.
just thinking as we're moving on, if as things come up, I just wanted to know if you have suggestions for improved language. feel free to send those over as well.
In addition to saying them verbally or instead of?
In addition, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there's no real rule around it, Lisa. I was just saying, feel
Yeah,
free
I
to
just
send it over. Yeah.
I know this is a very prescribed process.
Yes.
I think maybe just understanding what you all are looking for would be great.
Yeah.
Great. So next we have definitions. So key definitions have been updated and expanded to include terms like autonomous authority, backbone entity, and priority populations. The definition of at risk now explicitly includes systemic and individual racism or discrimination as factors affecting child well-being. The rule also defines governance council's independent decision-making authority over funding and strategic direction. And to the right of this, you'll see the new and updated definitions that are included. So we have at risk that has been updated, autonomous authority that is new, backbone entity is new, early learning hub is updated, family voice and leadership is new, governance council is new, in-kind contributions is new, operational support is new, opportunity gap is new, priority populations has been updated, and system coordination funds is new. And this one, if you want to look at the draft rules that we have, again, are on page 1 of the just draft rules. Yes, Jennifer, Jen?
Yeah, hi. So number 11, I think I don't have any issue with the first part of it, but at the end where it says the governance council operates with full investment decision-making authority, et cetera, that sentence, I think that doesn't belong in a definition. I think that belongs in the part we're going to be discussing tomorrow. And I would just advocate that we cut it off with the beginning of that definition.
Right. Thank you, Jen.
And so I see it talks about the governing council and, its privileges and allocating resources, but would it be reflected in the bylaws where it says who's on the governing council or where is that found? What does a governing council consist of? That's in Raise Up Oregon?
We will get to that a little bit more of just the different sector partners that we're looking to have represented, and we will be touching on that rule tomorrow. But yes,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, no problem.
And did you have another question or comment?
No, sorry, just forgot to put my head down.
Oh, okay. Lisa?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a good recommendation, but I know when I talked with my board of directors and looking at all of these pieces, the at risk definition, I have some curiosity where that might be coming from. And then also curious how this may align with DHS and some of the work that they do. And because that it becomes a pretty subjective thing if we're not careful. And I think we all intuitively know what that means, but it might create some challenges as we're looking at it purely from a rule point of view. And I think in the earlier version, on the orange version, it talks about neglectful or abusive caregiving. And that can become sort of trippy language. So I think just some thoughts around that could be maybe if refined a little bit more.
Lisa, do you have any thoughts on language that would feel a little bit more inclusive or feel better for your governance or yourself that you're thinking of?
Well, that's where I started with like, I'm not sure exactly what to recommend language wise. I can put some more thought into it. I mean, ultimately, I think it's just sort of looking at, where a population's not thriving, either through socioeconomic or other factors, which, that's where the community data kind of comes into play. But that's pretty squishy to put in rules too. So, it's such a squishy topic. I feel like we all are probably kind of thinking along the same lines, but it could get a little trippy, particularly if we're making judgments about families. And that might not put us in the best light with the public.
Thank you. Diane, I believe you were next.
Yeah, thank you. I had similar thoughts to Lisa, just questioning the housing that is inadequate. That can vary by culture or by community. So what is the definition of inadequate? And then the same with priority populations. I've had experience where priorities are made without the community sometimes. And so who's making those decisions about what a priority population is?
Thank you. Annalise.
I'm gonna put something in the chat. I've got a suggestion. But I'm gonna put it in the chat because I think that's probably easier for everybody.
All right, thanks so much. Damiana, I hope I'm saying your name right, or please correct me.
It's Delmiana. So
Damiana.
close.
All right, thank you.
I just when who said that, Jen or Lisa, about the neglectful or abusive caregiving, it also, I mean, I feel like healthcare and medical treatment needs that are unmet is also very vague, or could be like who's determining what the need is and what's not being met. I don't know. That seems very open to judgment though, or not judgment, that's not the right word. You know what I mean?
Thank you for that. Megan.
Yeah, so definitely agree with everything that's been said, but also looking kind of in that same line, looking at the opportunity gap. That's another area that I don't know, just sits a little interesting with me, especially when it's talking about, factors contribute to or perpetuate lower educational aspirations, achievement and attainment for certain groups of students. So I don't know, that one, I don't have any suggestions, but mm, I don't like it. So I'll try to think of something and put it in the chat in terms of a suggestion.
Okay, great. Thanks, Megan. I will read from the chat since we still have time and I don't see anyone with a hand up.
Yep.
So I see suggestion. At risk means that a child's environment has been identified for intake for services based on several factors, which may include but are not limited to. Thank you for that, Annalise. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that? So my thought is what I think this is trying to get at, what this rule or what this definition is trying to get at is that if from whatever pathway a family is identified to the hub identifies a family's environment for possible evaluation, for services, or intake, for financial help, or it, whatever is needed, right? Special identification assessment, whatever, special needs assessments or whatever, right? That's what at risk is, and that you're trying to say that a family, that the risk factors that the state wants to identify are household that are near poverty, housing that is inadequate, caregiver suffering from mental health, significant or documented domestic conflict. So I think what this is trying to get at, if I'm reading this all correctly, is that the definition needs to be in there so that hubs and everyone, very transparent to everyone, that a designation of at risk can come from any of these sources. And that gives the hub the ability to be able to start working for that family on behalf of that family, providing services and supports, right?
And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we are at time.
So anyway, so that's what I was trying to cobble there.
Great. Thanks, Annalise. And thanks, Rachel, for keeping us on track. We will keep going with our slides. I'll hand
All
it back.
right. The next one we are going to review is Early Learning Hub functions. And you can find the proposed rules on page 3, and on the Secretary of State tracking document, it's on page 22 of my document. So purpose and background, this rule establishes hubs as regional conveners to align early childhood services with the ability to leverage public and private resources, coordinate and allocate needed services. So some of the changes we made were to create alignment with Raise Up Oregon, to include sectors and tribes as partners, and to make the Early Learning Hub functions inclusive of all of the hub funding streams, to strengthen the role of the Governance Council, and to emphasize that hub strategies, funding allocations, and service delivery approaches are equity-driven and address the opportunity gap among the designated priority populations within their region. And the impacts of the change is that hub engagement is comprehensive and inclusive of the 7 regional sectors and tribes in that region. Hub system work is in alignment with Raise Up Oregon. Investments are driven by equity, and regional assessments are utilized to understand needs. So we'll open it up to the group now for feedback. Lisa?
Sorry, my cursor died. All right, so if I'm following along, I have a couple of questions in, I think it is 2 in that section, number 2, I C, ensuring that service providers contracted by the hub are accountable for child and family level outcomes. Do you see where I am?
I do, yes.
And am I in the right spot? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. The word accountable is a little problematic for me. That reads pretty harsh because absolutely we all want, whether it's, children to know all of their letters, sounds, and all the things by kindergarten, but there are some things that are kind of out of the locus of control when we think about the outcomes for the child and family outcomes. There's a give and take. It can't be just about what the entity does. It's also about the family engagement and the family pieces. I get it that anybody that we are subcontracting with needs to be accountable to the agreement and perform the services 100%, 100%, and they need to be evidence-based in all those pieces. But it's the word accountable that I think
Yeah.
might be challenging. And then can I go
Lisa,
on?
can I just quickly ask if if there's another word that comes to mind that would be better?
I think accountable may be fine, but it's the child and family outcomes that that's where it gets real. And this is real work. I'm not trying to like make it sound like we're not doing things, but we need to work with organizations that are willing and able to do the work, high quality work and all of the things, but it's that child and family outcome. And because frankly, we may not know for years what the outcome is for some things.
Right.
So,
Thank you. That helps.
yeah. And then on moving down onto 4A and B, um, the comprehensive budget piece, um, I think that needs to be clearly defined. Is that the comprehensive budget, is that just about funding that is coming to the hub system? Or I know early on in the hub days, there was, part of the work was to work with every single child and family service organization to see how many dollars you had going to serve families with children ages 0 to 5. And that proved to be a big morass and not achievable. So when I read this, that's the language that I immediately went back to, and maybe that's not what's intended. But so I think just some clarity around that, and you may or may not have an answer now. Um, and then also in that sentence, it says funds allocated by the department to the hub region. I would probably just say hub there because we serve the region, but you're not contracting with the region, you're contracting with the hub.
Thank you.
And then likewise in B, mapping all funding streams, including local, state, federal, and philanthropic funding. Again, I think just sort of questioning what's the scale on that? Is that all funding coming into all partners that, is doing that work? Or is it just about all the funding streams that we have locus of control over so that and you can see how all these funding streams are helping to do the work? So I'll put that as a question mark, but I think that needs to be really clear in this
Thank
rule.
you. Thank you, Lisa. Diane?
Hi, thank you. Yes, I also had some questions around the terms accountable. I saw it in regards to the people that are contracting with the hubs, but I never see it around the hubs. And so I'm curious about, yes, and I agree with Lisa on, holding them accountable for these outcomes. What are those outcomes? They look different with in-home providers, with school districts, with all kinds of different entities that are partnering. And then um, the number 4D, again, ensuring contractor providers are accountable for delivering cost-efficient services. I think the hubs need to be held accountable for actually delivering those cost-efficient services as well. So I'd like to
Great.
see if we are going to have the word accountable, that it should be used equally.
Thank you, Diane. And I'm seeing something in the chat. It's under 2C. Thank you for including that. Ensuring that service providers coordinated or contracted by the hub are committed to achieving child and family level outcomes that support the objectives of Oregon's Raise Up Oregon initiatives.
And Nancy, we are at time.
Okay, thank you. All right. And just to remind everyone that we have a note taker and we're transcribing, and we'll get all of the information and questions in the chat also. Okay, moving on to a new rule. This is administration, and you can find it on page 5 of the draft rules that we sent you. So the summary is this rule specifies that the department administers all grant agreements, ensuring compliance with program guidelines and fiscal oversight that contribute to building the Early Learning Hub system. The system may not include more than 16 early learning hubs under ORS 417.827. It reinforces the Governance Council's exclusive authority over hub investments as written in the grant agreement and outlines enforcement measures for noncompliance, including corrective actions or funding reductions. Hubs may use additional funding sources, but department funds must be allocated in alignment with regional priorities. And I'll open it up to feedback. Brett?
I'm reading the language around in all cases, Governance Council provides oversight and authority of investments and has approval of contracts and or agreements. I'm just trying to think that through because I think that it makes perfect sense for governance councils to have authority over deciding how funds are allocated, right? And in some cases, that means contracting or setting up an IGA or whatever the case may be. The where I'm getting stuck is has approval of all contracts. And the reason that I'm getting stuck on that is because I don't know that it makes sense for governance councils to get caught up in what might be boilerplate language that goes into all contracts that that the backbone entity executes. And I think having some delineation between the governance council role in establishing contracts and the backbone entity's role in establishing contracts could be helpful in terms of avoiding potentially sticky situations.
So you would want to do that. Are you looking at number 2 in the rules, in that rule?
Yes.
Is there any like term or any phrase that you'd like to see added there? If
Yeah,
not, that's fine.
I feel like I'm offering feedback without offering good suggestions for what
That's
to make
okay.
changes to. So I'm sorry for that. But something that gets at like um the governance council providing oversight and authority of investments, like that part makes perfect sense. And it's where I'm getting stuck is has approval of contracts.
Okay.
I, um I think I think we want the governance council to have approval authority there when it's in the context of this is the spirit of the work that we're trying to do and a specific strategy for how we're executing that work with a contract with a community partner, but not necessarily be involved in the back and forth of hammering out contract language and getting hung up in some of those technical pieces.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I'm seeing Annalise wrote, I'd add contracted by the hub, demonstrate commitment to achieving outcomes through program delivery. And Jen said, I agree with Brett here. The governance council should have authority over the priorities of the hub, but contracting is a backbone function. And I'm going to call on Jillian next.
Yes, I think there may be times when the governance council may want something in a contract and the backbone doesn't put it in the contract. So when you have situations like that, I don't know, I didn't read this, that the governance should look at every dot and tittle and, kind of negotiate back and forth. It was my assumption that hub staff would work on this. So I'm not sure I understand why the governance couldn't have some kind of input into contracting to make sure that as they're holding partners accountable, that as you go back to the contract, that all of the wording is in the contract that the governance had hoped would be there.
Thank you, Jillian. Diane and then Megan.
You bet. I can see where Brett is coming from as well, but also agree with you, Jillian. I think a lot of times our governance councils are made up of their community partners, and so the risk for conflict of interest is high there. And I have been at meetings where an entire county was left off as we were going through the contracts, and it wasn't noted until we were looking through these RFAs that they only reached out to a certain, group of people. So I understand not wanting to get, stuck in the mire of the contracts, but since we have such differing backbone agencies, like a community college may not see something that an ESD will see. And I think it's important to have our voices on those contracts.
Thank you, Diane. Megan?
Yeah, so I had a question, well, around on number 2, when it's talking about a hub that has demonstrated the ability to provide stable organizational and operational structures to the satisfaction of the department. So my 2 questions are, what, how do you, who's defining stable? And then also, what is the definition of like satisfaction of the department? So maybe some more clarity around that. It seems very ambiguous right now and very much open to interpretation.
Thanks for calling that out, Megan. I thought I saw another hand up.
It was me. I was just gonna, I was putting it in the chat too because of the time, but and I think Brett captured what I was hoping to add to that. Is that the language around how it currently is written could be seen how Brett took it, because I took it like that as well, where it is in those fine points of a contract rather than, as he wrote here, just the oversight and the scope of the work, that it's in alignment with the broader goals of the governance council. So
just for purposes, thank you, Rochelle. Just for purposes of translation, I want to read aloud what Brett wrote. That makes sense to me, Jillian. I think that governance councils having oversight of the scope of work within a contract generally makes sense. And Rochelle, you were agreeing with that?
yes, I think it's the difference between the oversight and if the language is so vague that it could be interpreted as they have to approve and be the signee on every contract.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to put a thumbs up on that comment, and there's no way to do that, but I would say exactly the same.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. We'll note that. Anything else? We probably have 30 seconds left or so.
We're at time, but
We're
if
at
we
time.
can, as your timekeeper, I will definitely give you 30 seconds if that's what you need.
Nope, I think we're good. Rachel, thank you. You're doing an amazing job. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the administration of Early Learning Kindergarten Readiness Partnership and Innovation Program. I'm going to pause for a minute because I said that way too fast. And this is also known as KPI. And you can reference it on page 11 of the draft rules. So the purpose of KPI, the purpose of these rules is they clarify that KPI funding must enhance early learning and K-12 alignment, support family engagement, and improve school readiness for priority populations. So this was an interesting one because this rule existed in a different division, in the 800 division. And so we wanted to bring this rule into the Hub Rule 900 division. So there were a number of kind of technical changes. I'll just read it really quickly. We removed Oregon Kindergarten Assessment as a kindergarten readiness factor because that assessment no longer exists. As I said, we moved the rule set from 800 to our 900 Hub division, and we removed a lot of outdated language on a defunct literacy grant. We also updated language to include continuity of services and supportive transitions for broader impact and use of funds. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lisa.
So I think, and I'm also kind of going back to Brett's initial question, the way I took this when seeing the KPI rule is in here is because that was legislation that was also passed in about 2013. Brett probably remembers really clearly those days. So that puts that in statute, which then creates the rule. So that made it, so I'm clarifying if that's correct, because it was in statute that it's now a rule, or it always was a rule. So we're updating. Is that right?
That's right.
Great. So going back to what Brett was asking about with coordinated enrollment, that is clearly a function that we have. And I think it also is something that probably should be called out in some form or format. But that is a contract that we have based on some other pieces. So that isn't in statute to my knowledge. So I'm trying to make sense of it from that perspective. So I guess it's just a comment. It's not really a change at all.
Thank you.
And I'm agreeing with Brett that it is very much an important function, whether it's coordinated enrollment around subsidized preschool programs or it's coordinated enrollment about something else. It's about that coordination of services to support children and families.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. We'll wait another minute or so to see if any feedback comes in.
Brett, I see your hand up.
Oh,
Thank you. I think the language that's in the proposed language on page 11, I think does a nice job of capturing, I think what I always understood the intention of KPI funding to be. I guess I'm just wondering, in some senses, how much this language reflects the reality of what is currently happening with KPI dollars, and if the department wants to ensure that these are the ways in which KPI funds move forward. So, for example, in section 1, where it says must invest KPI funding to increase the connection between early learning K-12 and other regional sectors to support successful transition to kindergarten. The way that that's written implies to me that there must be some type of cross-sector collaboration for a project to receive funding under KPI. And I can envision scenarios in which school districts get funding to run their kindergarten transition camps in August, for example, and where there's not necessarily an implication of a partnership, but just we're running a program. KPI funding is helping us to do that. So if those types of programs are going to continue to be eligible to receive KPI funding, I think you might want to loosen up the language a little bit and maybe make it like an and or in section 1. Or alternatively, if the department determines that prioritizing the cross-sector partnerships is really what this is about, then cool, like leave it as is. But it's just making me wonder as I'm reading that. So
thank you. Thanks, Brett. Diane?
I may not have anything new to add, but as I was looking at it, I saw the same thing, must invest KPI funding. And sometimes I think we miss, as we're looking so much towards the money, we're missing the partnerships. That, like you said, we may not always need the money in the school districts, but we would like to know the hub exists and what work they're doing. And then I was curious in number 1B, providing opportunities for families to connect with early learning school, district, and community resources. What does that look like in reality?
Well, I can just respond kind of high level, but I think about what Brett just um, suggested with like the summer programs, where there's often a connection with early learning and the school and the district. That's what comes to my mind when I read this.
Mhm. And the only reason I ask it is looking at the large regions, especially when there's not boots on the ground in all of the communities, can there be like some language around not just providing opportunities by handing them a flyer, but actually, having someone there to say, we're here as well, that's
I
actually
see.
people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Megan?
Me again. Hi. Okay, two things. One is up at the very top on page 11, where it's talking about particularly priority populations. I know that's already been defined and we talked about that, but then it also talks about priority geographic areas. And I keep going back into the definitions and I don't see a definition of priority geographic areas. Um, my priorities probably in Southern Oregon is probably very different than some other people's. The other thing was on 4C, impact of outputs or activities on the attitudes, behaviors, or instructional practices. Um, I just am wondering how how that would be measurable. So maybe just a little bit more clarity or maybe different wording especially with the word attitude. Um, Yeah. So maybe something a little bit more concrete that could be measurable and then um, be able to be reported on and have that data.
That's helpful. Thank you, Megan. Looks like we have a minute left. Yes, Megan.
One more question.
Sure.
So at the very bottom, number two, funds received, all that maybe used only to provide funding for the purposes described in the grant agreement. I may be skipping ahead and I may be missing it, but is there something that says what happens if all the funds are not used for those purposes?
Thank you.
Megan, you concluded our time. Thank you.
Great. I think we just wanted to take a moment here to pause for any questions. And I believe we have let me take a look, about 10 minutes here. So any questions, or we could also utilize this to circle back if anybody had any other comments, wanted to respond to anything in the chat potentially. Jillian.
Yes. What I wonder also from Megan's question is, are all the funds supposed to be distributed through grant agreements? Because sometimes when we work with tribes, it may not be a grant agreement, it may be something that we provide. And so I'm just wondering where that would be included.
Thank you for that, Jillian. That's perfect. Courtney?
Hi. So I kind of want to piggyback um off of what Jillian mentioned. Is I'm with the Confederate Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and stepping into this conversation, I'm just curious as to what I guess how in the past or even now how have you ensured active participation and representation from any of the tribes? Because like we all have our own like priority populations, our own lots of, um, things to check off our own list. But how does that look on the scope of protecting our own sovereignty while working with DELC?
Those are great questions, Courtney. I know that we have been consulting with our Tribal Affairs Department here at DELC and making sure that we are taking that into consideration, as you'll see it also in our draft language that we'll touch on tomorrow. But since then, we have also gotten some updated language that we hope to implement into the next round, because we know that that is absolutely important and something that we need to consider and have it be reflected in our rules as well. Jillian.
To add to that, when we talk about our hub, we talk about 3 counties and 2 tribes, the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians and the Klamath tribes. We actually have 5 governments. And so somewhere in these rules, I would like it acknowledged that tribes are their own governments. I don't know that I see that in here, but I think it's really important to have.
Thank you for that. Yes. Yes, and I'll just read from the chat. Kate Dennison also wrote, Courtney, we are also utilizing the tribal consultation process and Dear Tribal Leaders letters to raise awareness of rulemaking activities at DELC. Any other thoughts or comments?
Bring back up the timeline slide.
Great. So we can talk about next steps and timelines. So tomorrow we have another RAC meeting where we will cover the other rules that we did not touch on today. So that is April 24th from 10 a.m. to 11:30. And we are hoping the RAC committee receives feedback summary by May 1st. And we will have another RAC meeting on May 8th from 12 to 1, where we will summarize the feedback and any potential changes. We will have a public hearing for the Early Learning Hubs on May 12th from 5 to 6. And our public comment period officially closes on May 31st at 5 p.m. And the Early Learning Hub rules will be presented to the Early Learning Council for a vote on June 25th, 2025. And also in the slide deck, if you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to Nancy or myself. And we also included the official public comment form. And I know that Kate also dropped in the email address for any just general rulemaking feedback as well. So, and Gabby just dropped it again. Thank you, Gabby. And those are our next steps for right now. Next slide, please, Gabby.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. And I also just want to highlight that the email, if you want to send a written comment, because we're providing different ways for you to provide just a written public comment, is delc.rulescoordinator@delc.oregon.gov. I just wanted to kind of say that out loud for folks who don't have access to the chat. And then this next slide really kind of just covers the RAC reimbursement process. So I will be handling the RAC reimbursements. Everybody who attends is eligible to receive a $50 stipend for each meeting that you attended. So I did take attendance for everybody here. What will happen is after the 3rd meeting, I will follow up with you all individually with some documentation that you'll have to sign and return. And then once that's returned, we get it submitted for processing. And so if you attend all 3 meetings, you're essentially eligible for, I believe, $150 for joining all 3 RAC meetings. And just want to see if folks have any questions around that. We'll frame this up in every meeting as well. And like I said, we'll wait until the last meeting on the 8th just to get that reimbursement process started, but wanted to see if folks had any questions around that.
I realize that everybody comes from a different lens here, so I'm just going to speak from an HR lens because that's my role. I don't want the $50 per day stipend that creates, or per meeting stipend that creates an ethical dilemma for me, because I'm on the clock already, on the clock. So I don't know how many people that are in the meeting that refers to, but yeah, I don't know if there's a way to decline that stipend, but that will be what I choose.
Yes. Great point, Debbie, and thank you for bringing that up. So we do, since I do send out an email just individually to everybody, it's just DELC's process. You are free to decline that. All you have to do is really just respond or just not return the paperwork. And that's essentially us taking that as I'm declining. I don't want the stipend.
Perfect.
Thank you for flagging that. Yeah, of course. I don't see any other questions. And then Maria, I just wanted to flag for folks because I know there was some administrative questions. So we did record this meeting and it will be posted on our YouTube channel just as soon as the video gets done processing. I'm hoping tonight, but at the latest sometime tomorrow morning. So if folks want to share the recording, I'm happy to send that out to folks. And I think tomorrow it'll be a much smoother process for folks to bypass that attendee versus panelists. So just keep an eye out for that. If for whatever reason Zoom is being Zoom, just keep in mind that for folks who can't bypass, I will be monitoring the attendee list to get you all added over here to be able to come turn on your camera and turn on your mic. So just want to give folks that heads up. It should be a bit of a smoother process tomorrow.
And I do see in the chat from Holly asking about the slides. They are included in the rack packet. So if you go through it, we did include all of it in there. So it is a lot of scrolling, but we're happy to see. I see Holly's response. I see it now. Thank you. That's wonderful. So yes, we have included the slides, draft rules, current rules, and agenda generally in that rack packet.
And I can resend the packet as well for tomorrow, tonight after this meeting ends, just so that it's at the top of folks' inbox.
Thanks, Gabby.
And I think I'll just finish up by giving a huge thank you to our interpreter, Adriana Santos. Thank you so much for your interpretation services. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening.
Really appreciate all the good feedback. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.